Well, hello, everybody, from the NFL Combine here in Indianapolis. I'm Dom Tibbetts. That's ESPN's Matt Miller. Our yearly tradition of talking about Bills prospects, what the Bills could do in this draft, and all things that come into this offseason. Matt, appreciate you taking the time to join us here. You look at this draft class, and you look at the glaring needs that the Bills have. I think a lot of people look defensively, especially up on the line, even in the cornerback room. But just your kind of gauge right now of where the Bills' most critical need is as they assess not only just this offseason, but where their prospects maybe lay in terms of their needs.
Yeah, last year when we did this, we talked about they need weapons. Well, they got Keon Coleman, so that helped. We saw Khalil Shakur just get locked up this week to long-term extension. So I do think defense is the key. We saw down the stretch this year how much the defense struggled. I look at even the defensive line. I love Ed Oliver. They've got some guys up there that I like, but they need an impact player on the defensive line. I always think corner. When you have to go against Mahomes and Burrow and Herbert and all the great quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson in the AFC, adding to that corner room, look what Philly did last year. They completely changed their defense by adding to the corner room. So I think this draft actually lines up well with where Buffalo has needs because it is a great D-end class, it's a great D-tackle class, and as far as corners go, I think there's really good depth.
Yeah, and so looking at just the line in general, I'll start there. The depth is obviously something I've heard a lot about, that there's good value for the Bills there, whether it's they're going to pick at 30 or they want to go later in the round. Let's just say Bills stay 30. What is sitting there in terms of, we got kind of the prospects that you maybe have your eye on, what fits with what Buffalo wants? Who do you see as a value pick if they stay late in that first round?
Man, I hope that Walter Nolan from Ole Miss is there because he's like Ed Oliver's little brother, So having those two together would be so much fun. Just having that guy that can penetrate, the guy who can make the splash plays in the backfield. So that's kind of his range right now. He could change that this week. I think we could be talking about him as the top 15 pick if he interviews well and he tests well. He would be like a fan favorite. Like, that would be great for you guys. But it is such a good D-tackle group that even someone like Shamar Stewart, who's going to play inside and outside from Texas A&M, he's, I think, going to have a big week here. He could absolutely be in that mix. Tyleik Williams from Ohio State, 320-pound, maybe more of a gap plugger than a penetrator. He's in that late first-round range. So I think we're all waiting to see, where does Mason Graham from Michigan go? Yeah. Because that's going to start to stack the board. Once he comes off, it does go down to, okay, now, where's Walter Nolan? Where's Kenneth Grant from Michigan, who's another? Kenneth Grant's 340 pounds. He's going to run in a sub-5-second 40 here, so he's going to be in that mix. Probably off the board before Buffalo, but waiting to see where that run on D-tackle happens.
Hindsight's always 20/20, Matt, so it's easier to look back on this in a few weeks when the draft is over in a couple months. But at that 30th pick, do you think a defensive line pick is a better value for the Bills, or is there maybe somebody there where you could say, okay, a position group of need, there might just be a better cornerback or even a better wide receiver there? Do you feel like the need is dire enough for somebody in the interior that the Bills should go to that, or do you think there's flexibility that maybe they go elsewhere with that pick?
No, I think there's flexibility. I really do. And, if a corner happens to fall, if Zadeh Barron from Texas happens to fall, or I don't think Will Johnson from Michigan is going to be there, but if a corner happens to fall, I think you have to go back to that BPA mentality. You really do, because you're so close. And I think where good teams mess up is when they reach to fill those needs instead of just building the best roster possible. So I think if you had to wait till round 2 for defensive tackle, Alfred Collins from Texas is going to probably be there in round 2. He's going to be a great fit for what you guys need up front, especially next to Ed Oliver. He's an athlete who's a one technique. He can be that gap plugger. He can keep the linebackers free. So I don't think it's a spot where, okay, at 30, we have to take a D-end or we have to take a D-tackle. You can go best player available, even on offense, because I do think there's a conversation to give Josh even more weapons, continue to add to what he can do offensively. So I don't feel like you're, backed into a corner at any one position.
Well, that leads right into my next question. Well, you bring up receivers. You talk about the Khalil Shakur extension. That's a 5th-round guy, so, right? Mm-hmm. Draft, develop, re-sign. Boom, and the Bills got that done. So let's just assume in those later rounds, what are maybe some wide receivers that kind of have that Khalil Shakur value-wise that maybe are sitting there in rounds 3 through 6 or whatever that the Bills could, again, add that becomes that weapon that Josh Allen needs to kind of continue off that MVP season?
When you talk about that, the first guy that comes to mind is Xavier Restrepo from Miami, he's this underneath route runner who has sticky hands. He's very, very tough working. Buffalo would love this guy because of how tough and physical he is underneath. And he's just a first down machine. He's probably going to be a 3rd-round draft pick, though, because he's not that big, he's not that fast. So that's going to be the key for him. Savion Williams from TCU is fascinating to me. He's coming off injury, so this week is big for him. He had 6 receiving touchdowns last year. Then they moved him to Wildcat quarterback. He had 6 rushing touchdowns, and he can throw the ball 80 yards. So it's like, hey, if you want to spell Josh on some of the red zone running he has to do, this guy can do it. He's done it before. So this receiver class is interesting, though. Unlike last year where we had so many go early, we don't really have that this year. And I think it is a conversation where how many are actually off the board by 29? Could we be looking at Luther Burden from Missouri, Matthew Golden from Texas? They could still very, very realistically be on the board. They would fit well in that room with Shakir, with Keon Coleman, and give you some more of that underneath attributes that they have.
Not even so much, Matt, just gearing towards what Buffalo's interest might be, though. You look at any round or any pick, any position, who's maybe a guy that I guess maybe would make sense for Buffalo, but is totally being slept on, that isn't talked about at all, that again might be that late value pick, or might be one of those sneaky guys that can crawl his way up into a day 2 pick?
One of my favorite players is Trey Amos, the corner from Ole Miss, and I feel like I'm alone amongst the draft analysts. I'm going to find out this week what the deal is, because I actually think he would be in play in round 1 based on my grade. But when I talk to people, they say, well, it's maybe more round 2. So that would be a name that if he's there, I would be incredibly excited about. But I also think you have to look at the safety group. And Xavier Watts from Notre Dame has just been a playmaker over the last 2 years. He's not super big, he's not super fast, but he just makes plays, consistently make plays at a high level. So I think he is that late round 2 range, where if you wanted to, add that playmaker in the secondary, either one of those guys, I mean, they're rookie starters.
Matt, you're so in tune with the prospects, and you're constantly talking to teams and colleges. I'm just curious to know, when an NFL rookie comes into a place like Buffalo, a place where the culture is so widely talked about and it's so embraced with what Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have created, do you almost feel like that in itself creates an environment where maybe if a guy isn't necessarily 100% NFL ready, he'll have the right development but also the locker room structure that he can kind of find a way to blossom, like we've seen some of those Christian Benfords, Khalil Shakir, Terrell Bernards become? Is that a factor, and maybe is that something that prospects look at as like, hey, let me find the right home? A place like Buffalo might be it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's the adverse is true as well. There are some franchises right now, unfortunately, where a player's drafted there and you almost automatically lower your expectations. Yeah. I think with Buffalo, Philadelphia, you raise your expectations, of, okay, these are the programs that they have the infrastructure, they have the culture, coaching on down, you have great leadership, starting with Josh, to where you feel like, okay, that's going to elevate this player a little bit. And I think we saw that even with Keon Coleman last year. His fit was going to matter a lot for expectation and long-term expectation. But when you go to a Buffalo and you see what they already have and the way they develop players, you feel a lot better about that prospect.
Perfect. Matt, where can people find and watch your work?
ESPN over the next 2 months, it'll be hard to miss me. ESPN.com for all the mock drafts and rankings.
How much sleep do you think you get in the next 2 months?
Not much. 6 hours a night is probably optimistic, yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining me. That's Matt Miller of ESPN. I'm Dom Tibbetts. We'll talk to you guys soon.